Pandemonium Reigns.
Pandemonium Reigns podcast. What is up? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is your boy Mike. Wanted to hit you guys with an episode. Going to talk about a little bit of Mississippi State, Tennessee, the Vols' 8th win of the season from last Saturday. Going to definitely get into Tennessee, Georgia, and then probably going to go on a pretty spicy rant about the state of how you get into the playoff, the brain pretzels that it sends these people into, all of those things. Can't wait to talk about it. The latter is kind of my favorite thing to do. Y'all know that. Excuse me. But nonetheless, thank you so much for tuning in. Really want to keep it pretty high level for Mississippi State. There'll be a few things that I go a little bit deeper into than others, obviously, because it's been a few days now, and all of the eyes, all of the lights on this sport are shifting and have already shifted towards Athens, towards Nico's health, towards Dylan Sampson's health, towards Dante Thornton's health. Obviously, there's other guys that are nicked and banged up because you've played 9 games, because it is November. And it is for some guys, depending on what position you play, it's a car crash along the offensive line and defensive line when they meet up every play. Other guys, if you're not getting hit and tackled, you're doing the tackling, you're doing the blocking, you're doing a lot of heavy lifting, and it weighs on you by November. Excuse me once again, sorry. But again, the Vols do get their 8th win of the season, moving to 8-1. Still just a loss to the Arkansas Razorbacks, obviously. And when you open up your ESPN app, your Yahoo app, wherever you get your sports intel, whenever you are killing time on the toilet or in the break room or in between work tasks, there you see the Tennessee Volunteers atop the SEC with that 8-1 record overall, and again just the 1 loss and 5 wins in conference. Again, not going to do it like I've been doing it, but all things that we've been waiting, willing, praying to see. Here we've got them. The Vols are in the midst of a special season that's coming a lot differently than what Heupel's brought before, but I'm not going to dwell on that as I do seemingly every recap and every episode that I do. But just again, keeping it pretty high level for Tennessee, Mississippi State, I think there were a few positives. Baby steps were taken. Now, baby steps were taken a little bit backwards on the defensive side. I don't know. Well, I didn't preview this game, so there's that. But, Heupel and Lebby, their relationship does not have to be discussed at much more length. They're buddies. They know each other. They run similar concepts depending on the personnel. I think Mississippi State, it's not a situation where year 2, year 3 probably they're making, a cosmic leap in terms of what they're doing. But I think in time, it may be a 4, 5, 6 year deal. But if that man can get players to Starkville, Mississippi, that will bode really well for those Bulldog fans, because, I'm a big believer in this type of system. I think both guys, like I said, play really well to their players' strengths. And, Mississippi State, they need a dog, and I think Lebby is that guy. Look at what he's doing just with Van Buren, the true freshman, and he didn't have a stellar game on Saturday night, but you can see the talent budding in that. Again, true freshman, was really a warrior on the road. Yeah, he made a high throw here or there, but guess what? Quarterback play across this conference is just above the dumpster this season. It's just not what anyone expected through 9-10 games, depending on when your bye weeks have fallen, but again, given time, I think things will go really well in Stark Vegas for the Bulldogs if they give Lebby time, if they buy really well into the NIL, getting guys out of the portal to fill holes, all those things. Really like a lot of what Lebby does. But, again, Tennessee won basically the same game, just a little bit better because, either these guys know each other that well. Tennessee obviously suffered some injuries during the game. I don't know where Tennessee was heading. Scoreboard-wise, when Nico exited the game, didn't re-enter the game. I almost said exited the game. He did exit the game, but the better term would be he didn't re-enter the game out of the halftime break. I don't know where the game was heading, if he was, healthy, if he was playing, because, we saw him take a big step on that deep throw to Dante Thornton, and it wasn't a perfectly thrown ball, but it wasn't an overthrown ball, which is what they've been. They've been high. They've been overthrown balls, mainly on the deep ball. I mean, that's been, and it's not a high percentage play, but it has been one of his bigger weaknesses, passing the ball. So we saw him make an adjustment. Maybe he figured out with that throw, okay, if that's not how much I need, and I don't need to overthrow him by 5-10 yards, here's how much I need. Maybe he takes another step later in that game. We don't get the luxury of finding out until the next time he enters the game at quarterback. Looks like it is a concussion situation, depending on Chris Bear-Fallica thinks he's not playing. Thamel, some of these other guys think he's playing. Usually we see concussions not be a 2-game ordeal unless it's extreme or unless they've piled up. And to our knowledge, they've not. I'm not a doctor. If he has a concussion, I don't want him to play. If he still has the symptoms, I don't want him to play. Just throwing that out there because, you get into his career, you get into the rest of the season, which is not over with a loss on Saturday. I don't care what Bud Elliott and co say. And even if you miss the playoff, you want to have a really good bowl performance. So, season's not over regardless of whether you lose, whether Nico plays, whether you win. The season's not over because then you can't sleep on Vanderbilt the way that you usually can sleep on them. But again, Nico was taking some baby steps. He was pretty decent. I would say average at worst on Saturday night in terms of when you look at his performances on the year. It came out to 8 of 13 for 174 yards and 2 touchdowns. We know he missed Brew going into the end zone, I think, before the 4th and medium touchdown pass to Squirrel White, which looked vintage. That looked vintage. That was beautiful. And then enters Gaston Moore. Some are calling him, I don't know, Chuck It. They're calling him Chucky for how he chucks the ball down the field. I'm going to call him Gas Moore because that man is all gas, no brakes in terms of looking how far he can throw it. It's fun to watch when you're winning. It would be a scary sight, I think, for sure, for Tennessee to go into Athens, Georgia, and for Gas Moore, to have to lead the offense. I don't think that would bode well at all. But all I'm saying is he was 5 of 8, and I think all 3 incompletions were the pass interferences that he drew because he put a competitive ball out there every time on the deep ball. 38 yards. No touchdowns, no picks. I think that's good because he's thrown picks in his limited action all year, not necessarily all in the Bama, the Bama version where he throws it as far as he can, all that. But Dylan Sampson was a warrior. What's new? Nothing. I mean, that injury probably scared me more than Nico's injury, which sounds probably asinine to say, but I mean, he's going to be a 1,400-yard rusher at minimum if he stays healthy. And all of the good, all of the growing pains, all of Nico's season, it is just not quite what we thought it would be. And this dude is your heart and soul, Dylan Sampson. You can't lose him. You certainly can't play in Athens, Georgia without him. He's got to be hurting because, I've turned my ankle on goofy little things where you don't see the vicious, side, foot is sideways, leg is vertical. You don't see that. I've turned my ankle on stuff like that, just goofing around or playing pickup basketball, you name it. I've had nasty ankle turns playing things like that, basketball, just doing this and that as a kid growing up. But we didn't see that. We didn't see that vicious, again, that foot turn, that nasty thing that kind of makes your stomach just churn. But for Dylan Sampson to go down the way he did, you have to think he was really hurting, okay? I think it was big. I think this speaks, and I'm not going to go into it the way I have on every episode, but Cameron Seldon burned his red shirt on Saturday night to the tune of six rushing attempts for 26 yards. He burned his red shirt for that. I think that's big. I think it would have been super easy to say, nah, man, this season's not gone my way. I've been passed up by a freshman. Y'all don't see what you're missing in me. Stuff like this. And check out. We see guys enter the transfer portal verbally during the season all the time in the 2020s. I mean, it's just what it is. And he didn't do that. Now, I'm not saying he's back next year. I'm not saying he's 100% locked in, but I am saying that if Dylan Sampson decides to go pro and cash in on this magical season that he's had, you're going to need Cam Seldon unless you knock it out of the park in the portal, unless Peyton Lewis takes a quantum leap for one, it's his vision right now that hurts him as much as anything. And pass pros, this and that with all of our young running backs when they've in this era so far. Unless Dylan Sampson, gets the bag at Tennessee to stay, you're going to need Cam Seldon next year. So I would almost call him a full 2 leave. But again, I think that's a big culture win. He was willing to come in and and play when the team clearly needed him more than any game so far this season. I thought for sure that it would look a lot like Cam Seldon, RB2, Peyton Lewis probably in the Dylan Sampson-ish role where he's getting the late game stuff when we're up. He's getting a drive here or there because we don't sub. And it's just looked totally different because you've had to rely on so much on Sampson. And I didn't want to see that on Saturday against Mississippi State. But guess what? We had to. I think at the time that he went down, that was his 19th or 20th carry of the first half, which is not good. You can't be giving the guy the ball that many times and expecting things not to go wrong at some point. When he fumbled the ball, he had a pretty good rap on it. He had two hands on it. He was going to cover it up. And this one felt more like bad luck than running loose with the ball or just bad form. The Mississippi State safety put his helmet right on the ball, right on the wrist, really, and forced it loose. You can't ask Dylan Sampson not to do that much more as carries go up. Not only do the chance for injuries, but also the chance for fumbles and turnovers and mistakes. Though he wrote, my long-standing memory of that game for him will be that he was a warrior and that he had his most impressive, his fastest run of the game after the ordeal with the ankle happened, or, whatever, lower extremity, as Heupel might say. And I'm not criticizing, I'm just playing on it because it is funny. But that'll be my long-standing memory of Sampson after this game. Not that, oh my God, we had to give him the ball 30 times against Mississippi State. I don't love that at all. Not ever advocating for it. We did give it to Lewis 14 times and Seldon 6, but it'll be that he's a warrior and that he's got plenty of speed still in that little frame that he's got. How good he is. Now, to the defense for a moment, harassed the mess out of Michael Van Buren, and he did do some nasty escape top things with his legs, often on late down situations. We didn't adjust very well to that. His long run on the game was 7 yards, sacks and everything included. He netted -9 yards because, again, college football does the math right. 4 sacks for Tennessee, 9 tackles for loss. And that's with your worst rush defense performance of the year, where you had a back go 20 for 125 and 10 for 63. They netted 179 rush yards. Not great. I go back to Lebby and Heupel know each other. I go back to grind of the season at this point. You've probably showed where you might be vulnerable on your all across the field, but you've shown where you might be vulnerable. Again, Mississippi State is not totally devoid of talent. I think they've got 2 pretty decent backs, if not above average or really good backs. I think Van Buren's going to be a star. I think Lebby can be a star. Now, I don't know that it'll happen at Mississippi State unless they really give him the time and probably deal with some frustrating or embarrassing losses. But given the time, I'm a believer in Lebby. It just might take for him to bounce and hit greener pastures somewhere if he's not willing to rebuild, if Mississippi State's not willing to rebuild, etc. I don't want to continue to go into that too much. Finishing up the thoughts on Tennessee, Mississippi State. For once in our lives, we were out-penalized. Mississippi State did, look, man, they had some holds, as usual, that weren't called. Tennessee got away with some things for sure. They didn't get away with pulling a guy, Lance Hurd. He got busted for that. We don't ever see that called unless it's against Tennessee. I'm just saying. Just saying. But Tennessee, out-penalized by 35, won the time possession by 9.5 minutes because that's just how this season's played out. 9.5 minutes is my loose math. It was 25-42 for Mississippi State to 34-16, 18 for Tennessee. I also need glasses if you can't tell. Boy's aging. But again, almost 180 more total yards, and that's coming off the heels. There's so much in that. That's coming off the heels of one of your worst defensive performances, at least rushing defense, rough night. That is with Nico Iamaleava playing a half of football, with the scare of losing Dylan Sampson for at least this game, if not more. You were about 1 for 3 on third down, 1 for 2 on fourth down with the big touchdown from Nico to Squirrel there. And again, Squirrel's a warrior too. I'm not going to leave that talk to Dylan Sampson and him alone. But Squirrel is a warrior too. That is awesome. I don't see a scenario in the world where you don't have him next year. And with his usage, with some of his explosion, his circus catch stuff, I did have a brief scare also because I had a little BVS left, battered ball syndrome, of course. But there's no doubt Squirrel White's probably wearing orange next year. That's great. That's huge for Nico. That's huge for this receiving core in theory. Although they've obviously, looking forward a little bit after playing 9 games, they've got big steps to take next year. You're probably gonna have to get back in the portal or or finally trust your young receivers. And obviously you got to get some guys healthy. There's no doubt. On to the Georgia Bulldogs, Athens, Georgia. Athens, Georgia, Saturday night. I was trying to come up with a joke there about players getting arrested. It didn't come to me immediately. I'm ashamed of myself. That's the reason for the pause there. Please forgive me, guys. 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Athens, Georgia, Sanford Stadium, between the hedges. They are 10-point favorites currently per ESPN Bet. Not my favorite source, but that's where it's been. 8.5, 9.5, 10. That's where it's been at. Over under is a pretty low. It's not the lowest I've ever seen, but it is 48.5. I don't see any scenario where that gets hit. Tennessee's got Nico questions. Georgia's got massive Carson Beck questions, ball security, protecting their quarterback questions. They've got all those questions. Tennessee's going to have those questions because this is going to be one of the top 3, I'm just guessing here, top 3 defenses, if not the very best defense that you've played all year. That's probably the more likely scenario, that they will play coming off a loss to Ole Miss like the best defense that Tennessee's faced all year. That's just probably how it'll go. I'll get into trying to piece together a score prediction here in a moment. Not incredibly optimistic, just sitting here midweek. Whether Nico plays or not, I'm not that optimistic. But again, there's some doubt in my mind because of the injury that we did witness, because of how many times you've had to run Dylan Sampson, all those things. Now, again, 10-point spread, 48.5. I don't think it gets there. Let me kind of talk about what I don't like for both teams, and then I'll probably try to build to a projection from that. What I don't like: Georgia does not run the ball efficiently. They do not run the ball well. I think they're like 15th out of 60 in the SEC in rushing average yards per carry, something like that. They are not doing what Kirby Smart likes to do from that position, from that huge aspect of the game. And that parlays perfectly into the next thing that I don't like for Georgia. If they don't get their run game going, I'm not saying they won't. I'm not saying they will. Mississippi State probably showed them some things to attempt. And it's also possible that, their offensive line pulls together, realizes that this is an elimination game, probably more so for them than it is for Tennessee. A big loss at home does hurt more probably for them than Tennessee with the loss on the road in a good environment. All those things. If they're not able to run the ball well, Ole Miss was terrorizing Carson Beck. They were just a wrecking crew. I mean, I think it was 4 sacks, 5 sacks, something like that. And his decision-making all year has just looked like a man that is not focused, has his mind on, maybe I should have went to the NFL. Maybe it's on the money. I'm not accusing. I'm not saying for sure. I'm just saying I thought he was going to be the best quarterback in the league this year. And that is part of why I said earlier that quarterback play in this league is somewhere just north of the dump, of the garbage dump. He's not been who we expected. The turnovers have been bad. It's been here and there getting, a strip sack. It's been very frequent throwing it to the other team. I don't understand it. They retained, what we know is they retained Mike Bobo. They retained a lot of their staff. They brought back 2 of their 3 or so frequently used tight ends, but the one that they lost was Brock Bowers, and that looms large. The guy that they lost, that they missed the most on the outside, not that he played all of the time in college because he was frequently injured as well, as Ladd McConkey. You can't tell me that they don't miss those guys. Dejon Edwards, they've been excited about Branson Robinson for like 2 or 3 seasons now, and he just is not all the way there, whether it's health, whether it's something he's doing in practice, I don't know. Those are the things that I don't like for Georgia. I mean, defensively, yeah, they've been susceptible to quarterbacks running the ball at times. You can't tell me that Nico's going to be freely and willy-nilly running the ball because of the concussion scare. All of those things, you don't want to get him killed down the season stretch because, the way it's going to work, and this will be a teaser for the rant I'll probably go on, but if you do lose Nico, it already weighed on their decision last year, and they already want to leave you out. Seemingly, they want to leave Tennessee out if they go 11-1 or 12-1 winning the SEC. They want to find a way out. At least the talking heads do. More on that in a minute. But again, those are the things that I don't like for Georgia. Carson Beck, the way he's played, definitely the way he's been protected, and the way he's been supported by his, pass catchers has been atrocious. That's been probably the most glaring weakness for Kirby in this program, despite the 2 titles, is the pass catchers. And they've had some electric ones, and they have not gotten on the ball enough. I mean, these guys that they have now are not scrubs, but again, getting them the ball enough and in space has been a challenge this year more than others. Defensively, I think Georgia's going to be all right. I mean, again, I was what started my mental loop right there was, saying that Nico's probably not going to be willy-nilly around the ball, but they are susceptible to that if Tennessee finds the courage, finds the strength, coaches him to get down and not take hits. They've been susceptible to that this season. Very little else. They've looked more like themselves, especially in the time frame between beating Texas by 2 touchdowns and losing to Ole Miss by almost 3. They've looked more like themselves, but again, there will be plays there if Tennessee can protect Nico, which is one of the things that I don't like for Tennessee, transitioning to that side of it. I don't like for Tennessee protecting Nico. I don't like the receivers and their toughness and their drops I don't like it. I don't like that matchup, but this is not the Georgia secondary of 2 or 3 years ago. It's not that, but they are good players, and they can shut you down if you come in there soft, if you do not come in there catching the ball, asserting yourself. That has to be done. To do that, Nico has to be given time. The offensive line has been taking steps, but I could foresee a situation where 3 to 5 holds minimum get called on Saturday night because, well, there comes to BVS again. That's probably what that is speaking, but I can see that. They've not been good in the playing clean, playing penalty-free department. They've not done that well. All those things, there's not much that I do like offensively other than that number 6 finished that game strong against Mississippi State, and now the defense turns up a big notch. You should, in theory, have your workhorse to lean on, finding him the room, especially if Georgia wins if their pass defense defeats Tennessee's pass offense. We'll see what Sampson can make happen, and maybe he will get 1 Heisman vote at the end of the season if he has a big game. I don't know, because again, it's just silly season. It's absolutely what it is. Cannot wait to get into a bit of a rant here at the end of this, but I probably need to throw together a projection before I get to the rant. Confidence is not there for me. I mean, this is a dream scenario for coaches and for players that want to perform on big stages because, well, Georgia's not definitely in with a win. They're pretty well out with a loss. Tennessee is in the playoff, maybe in Atlanta with a win. I mean, you're trending right. You're sitting right there at 11-1 if you win in Athens. That's as big as the stakes get in the regular season, albeit November when things get really tight, and you had to be perfect 12 years ago. You had to be pretty dang good within the last 10 years, and again now, I don't know what you have to do if you're an Orange, but if you win this game, you're right there at 11-1 and you're in. The stakes are just huge. The stakes weren't this big 2 years ago. You could have conceivably lost that game, found your way into the 4th spot in theory until what happened in Columbia, South Carolina. But this is a win and you're in scenario. I mean, this is why Sampson with the quote the other night. It's always the quotes for me when it comes to this culture and these guys. Or maybe it was midweek press conference is what it was for Sampson. That's why I signed my name on the dotted line. I mean, we're gonna feel so fondly about Dylan Sampson for the rest of our lifetimes when we look back on his career. But again, this is why you sign on the dotted line, to play in games like this, to play yourself into massive postseason competition, playoff berth level stuff. For the first time, 20 plus years, you've had opportunities within that time frame. You've not done it. You can all but solidify it on Saturday without worrying about Atlanta, without having to play a perfect season again 12 years ago, BCS, without having to have 1 loss maximum, in the last 10 years. That's the opportunity. Based on how Tennessee's played on the road, I'm not going to call for it. All of the bad that Georgia's done this year, all of the bad that Tennessee's done, or at least the not meeting of expectations, I'm not going to call for that team to win on the road, maybe especially with those circumstances. I mean, if this was an average road game, we would be much less on guard. We would be feeling a lot better, but this is the game of the year. It's what it is. It's what it has built into is the game of the year. And just all those things, I'm not going to call for Tennessee to win one of those until they do it. And, what I didn't say earlier without saying it is that this is the best opportunity you've had to get a win in this series in several years. You were part of what let Kirby get going by hiring terrible coaches, by keeping them longer than you should. When you were doing that, most recently, Kirby was building a title contender, and it took him longer to get there than he probably thought, or than definitely the recruiting rankings would have thought, the talent and where that team was trending thought. But here we are. I'm going to say that Tennessee does cover 10 points because I do have a lot of respect. They've earned the goodwill by playing below average. They've earned the goodwill. I'm going to say that Tennessee covers. Georgia wins the game. I'm going to say it's a close one, and it may not be that way throughout, but the final score is a close one that Tennessee covered. And again, I don't see this scoreboard being in jeopardy of hitting the over unless these teams just break out of two collective funks. And one team could do that much easier than the other. For two teams to do that when they've had season-long funks or two-thirds of a season-long issues on offense, it would be wild to see that with the way these defenses have been. So, lower scoring game. We're hitting the under. Tennessee's covering, but Georgia's winning 20 to 13, something like that. Touchdown maximum. I think there are scenarios, and I talked about this a week ago. There are scenarios where Tennessee wins this game. Nico getting hurt really impacts that for me, and even if he's not on the injury report, he's playing the game. Well, I know in the back of my mind he's coming off a concussion. I know that he's coming off a lot of hits in that game where he didn't, where he was hit late, throwing the ball clean, but after the throw or as he's throwing the ball, he gets hit. But again, all those things are leading me to something like Georgia 20, Tennessee 13, that ballpark. And again, there are scenarios for both teams to win the game. As it goes, I said this, I think, a week ago. I don't think Tennessee wins the game big. I think Georgia's more than capable of doing that in terms of who could win the game big. But my gut feeling midweek, hope I'm wrong, pray I'm wrong, going to be, praying that I'm wrong, is that Georgia wins a fairly close game and Tennessee covers. And, I think that's where we'll be. And then we'll get into silly stuff like this where, this is one example. There are others, obviously. This is one example of Bud Elliott's playoff projection, what he thinks will happen. This was Monday night, 11/11/2024, the year of our Lord. Just going to run through them real quick. Number 1, Oregon. 2, Texas. 3, Miami. 4, BYU. 5, Ohio State. 6, Penn State. 7, Ole Miss. 8, Notre Dame. 9, Georgia. 10, Indiana. 11, Boise State. 12, Alabama. All right. I could literally argue all but 10 of those, just about. Okay, I think, obviously, you're not going to have an undefeated SEC champion. If you have an undefeated Oregon that has won the Big Ten in their first year there, they're the undefeated conference champ. They're the best undefeated conference champ. They're number 1. Cool with that. SEC champion is going to be number 2. No change in my mind on that. That's deserved. Especially if it's a one-loss team, that is so deserved. 3, Miami. Why would I think Miami's going to win the ACC at this point? They flirted with disaster for much of the year. And I'm not just criticizing this specific projection, but this dude has got me mad, so I'm going to go in a little bit. Why would I pick Miami over SMU, over Clemson, why would I pick them right now? They're flirting with disaster. They lose to Georgia Tech of all teams. Georgia Tech, if you are at the top of the ACC competing for that top spot, you don't want to see Georgia Tech. Florida State obviously was not that this year. That's a joke. 4, BYU. And, I'll go to the direction of Ward Manuel now instead of Bud Elliott. But, Ward Manuel, was asked why Indiana and BYU moved up, but Tennessee did not after last night's rankings came out, Indiana and BYU had big wins Saturday over Michigan and Utah, respectively. He didn't say that. He just said they both had big wins. Nico's injury was not a factor. I don't believe that for a minute. But again, Indiana and BYU had big wins over 4-win Utah when the game was rigged based on the call that helped decide that game, that kept BYU in it. That game was rigged. It was rigged. That's not a big win. These guys don't watch the games. Indiana with a big win over reigning national champions, the Michigan Wolverines. That's Ward Manuel's school. That's why it was a big win. It wasn't a big win. Just, hello. It was not a big win. Nothing big about beating Michigan this year, and I like Michigan. I hate where they're at, but nothing big about it. So those, again, that was 4 BYU and 10 Indiana in Bud Elliott's projection here. 5 Ohio State, whatever. I know the Darlings love Ohio State. I know they are the media darlings. If they are the runners-up in the Big 10, this is where they'll be. They'll be at 5 because they will have they'll have the equal number or so of losses to the SEC runner-up, depending on how it plays out. I'm cool with it. I don't care. 6 Penn State. I dropped my phone. I threw my phone. What has Penn State done? They've lost the only game that they've played. Don't tell me about their strength of schedule. They've played no one. They've done nothing. They've done nothing. They lost the only game they played. 7 Ole Miss. Dropped it again. Dang. Ole Miss lost to Kentucky at home. Losses don't matter. It matters when you lose. I think you can lose out in September, go undefeated the rest of the way, win big, you're in. They lost to Kentucky at home. This is not good Kentucky. This is like 3-win Kentucky. You lost to them at home in pathetic fashion. How do you do that, Lane? How do you do that and then beat Georgia? What we need, this is an aside real quick before I continue down this list, just real quick. What we need are not qualifiers, not resume builders. We need disqualifiers. If you lose to Kentucky, you lose to Kentucky at home, you're out. You're out. I don't care what you did. You're out. You lost to LSU, who is kind of not looking great at the moment. That's your other loss. You beat Georgia. That's your only thing you've done if you're Ole Miss. But you lost to Kentucky at home. This parlay is great to number 8. Notre Dame in this projection. You lost to Northern Illinois at home. Disqualified. I don't care what you did. You could win your conference. Oh, wait, you're not in one. You lost to Northern Illinois at home. This is not Marcus Freeman's first year in South Bend. You're disqualified. You're out. Those are the things that we lost when we lost the 14 playoff, when we lost the BCS. We lost disqualifying teams from competing for a championship because of terrible losses. You can lose these terrible games unless you're Tennessee and you travel to Fayetteville, Arkansas. You can't lose that one. You can lose to these horrid teams, these butt-booty terrible teams, win the rest of your cupcake schedule, not play in a conference, and according to Bud Elliott, you're in. Georgia's number 9. I won't have many issues with that. The issues I'll have is that if Tennessee wins in Athens this week, it'll be Tennessee 9 at 11-1 until proven otherwise. But Georgia wins this weekend, wins out. I don't care. Put them at 9. That's not the worst decision I've ever heard. 10 Indiana, big win over Michigan. That's their biggest win of the season. What would they do against any better of a schedule? And I'm not mad that Indiana's having a good year. That's cool, but they've not done anything yet. And unless they go undefeated approximately, then I don't know what it's worth that they've done this well just yet. Number 11, Boise State. We know that one of these top teams is getting in. Yay, inclusion. So glad that my college football postseason allows for inclusion and for a trophy to go in Boise State, or someone's case when your only game this year was Oregon, who you played well against, but you're going nowhere. You're probably losing to Penn State, and they don't even win the big games in this scenario. 12, Alabama. Again, probably whatever if they win out. And again, this will shake up depending on Tennessee, Georgia. Bud's clearly projecting that Georgia wins the game Saturday. That's fine, but head-to-head doesn't matter. Head-to-head doesn't matter. Only your wins and who you beat matters. Your losses do not matter. It breaks my brain. I mean, Heather Dinich has been campaigning for like 13 days that a 3-loss SEC team could get in if it's the right one in Crimson, I should say. That part she left out. Who you lose to does not matter. I would love to build in disqualifiers based on things like losing to Northern Illinois at home, losing to this Kentucky team at home. If Tennessee had lost to Arkansas at home, disqualified. It was on the road. You know, you've got less losses than these teams, or the same number of them at this point. Disqualified if you lose a game like this. You know, If Florida State had lost to Georgia Tech at home and they've improved, a team of that caliber of what Georgia Tech's been early in the season and then had turned around their season and was one loss at this point, disqualified. But obviously they disqualified themselves much earlier in the season. And again, these are just some of my thoughts on this ridiculous process. It's absolutely asinine. We got to get the humans out of this because there's too much bias. Bud Elliott, by the way, Bama grad, I believe, wouldn't be surprised. But we've got to get the bias out of it. The losses have to matter. And if, from one year to the next, it might be the wins, who you did beat. And that's why Alabama is in the scenario there. Because, they've beat an emerging Missouri's headed the wrong direction. They did beat them, and they look good doing it. They look good beating LSU. They lost to Tennessee. They lost to Vanderbilt in Nashville. That doesn't matter. It's all about the wins this year. It's all about who you beat. Not head-to-head, not who you lost to, any other year. No. This year included, you lose at Vanderbilt. Or I guess if they lost him in Tuscaloosa in my scenario that I talked about in a minute, I would ask for them to be disqualified. But we're never going to do that. It's just going to be, when the humans are involved, it's going to be a roller coaster. The metrics are going to change. Your quarterback's hurt, you're out. All those good things because of the human element. It is that fantastic. It is really good stuff. And it's fun to be involved and a fan of such a sport that is heading that direction. It really is. That's total sarcasm. Talked a minute ago about, if you haven't seen the end of BYU Utah, and just go look at it, because that game, that decision looked like we need to keep BYU undefeated. We need them to be undefeated, and we need them to win the Big 12. We're going to help them do it. That's what that looked like. It looked like garbage. Alabama won big, but there was a replay review that I think went from player down inside the one to touchdown, and I'm looking at elbow and wrist and all that stuff on Justice Haynes down before the goal line. That's it. They were winning the game regardless. The sport, so many issues, so many flaws. This week, another huge and great example of that, and it makes it really, really fun to have good things like that to rant about. So that's what this ended with. Obviously, hope I'm wrong. Hope I am dead wrong. I hope Nico is so healthy on Saturday. I hope the man has never played better. This is a big one for me, growing up as a Northwest Georgia boy, right here, south of God's country, Tennessee, that is. But it's a big one for me. Doesn't get much bigger than this on the whole because it's a win in your end game. So that's that. Hope I'm dead wrong. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We couldn't do it without you. We appreciate you so much. All the engagement, all the engagement, and the videos, the podcast that you guys check out means the world. We really appreciate it. We want to hear more. I also have to do a better job of responding to comments and things like that. But we want to hear more. Thank you guys so much. As always, God bless. Go Big Army.
Pandemonium Reigns.